Les Powers, or as everyone knows him as Corky, was born on March 12, 1947 in Rochester, New York, to Geraldine and Edward Powers. Jerry's father, Les Adams, operated food concessions and freak shows. At an early age, Corky could be seen ballying his pet Sputnik, the two-nosed wonder dog with 4 nostrils. It had black whiskers on one side and white on the other, or his pet Queenie, the 5-legged dog with 6 paws. He traveled all around Western New York, side by side with his grandpa as much as he could. His addiction to the business started at a very young age. As he got older, he invested in some games with his brother Dick Janis. They booked independently at the various carnivals, festivals, and fairs. They worked together for a few years until Dick decided to work with one carnival exclusively, and Corky set out to venture in the ride end of the industry. Corky bought his first ride, a Rubit's Slide, partnering with his longtime friend Bob Gillis in 1974. He borrowed a gasoline tractor from a carnival friend and drove from Western New York to Salem, Oregon, over 2,700 miles one way. It was a huge risk for a young man that had no idea if they would make it as an independent operator with just a slide. During this time, Corky had continued to maintain a full-time job at Caterpillar Forklift Truck Division. He had worked his way up in the company from sweeping floors to delivering forklifts to a shop mechanic to a road mechanic to the shop foreman and finally their service manager. After almost 10 years of dedicated service to that company, they came to him with an ultimatum. Either continue to work for us solely or leave our company to go play with your carnivals. Obviously, we know which path he chose. They continued on purchasing an F-80 airplane ride and a swinging gym. Corky still had a game trailer he worked as well during this period. They were traveling with a small show in New York that was having major difficulties in maintaining the everyday operations of the show. He asked Corky to help him, and very shortly after, Corky was doing everything for the small show. At the end of the season, the gentleman gave Corky the option to buy a few rides and take over his week route. Corky bought one of his rides and cupped only 3 of his locations. At this point, he was completely on his own with his own show, Amusements of Rochester. At which point, he had to book as many fairs, festivals, churches, and other events that were available. He booked on some independent rides, games, and food, and he was off. He rented a 30 by 40 building to refurbish his equipment, carrying individual pieces from rides inside to paint, all while trying to stay warm and dry using a salamander. Living in Rochester, New York during the winter months is not conducive to getting much of anything accomplished outside. Several years later, they purchased a winter quarters in Corky, New York. As to the exact date he met his wife, Debbie, neither one of them can tell you. It seems they've known each other forever. Both being from Western New York, they played many locations together. She was one of his biggest supporters when he decided to start his show. As their platonic friendship grew, she became one of his greatest cheerleaders when he questioned all the obstacles that show owners face. Eventually, they were married. Debbie had 2 young boys, Dean and Philip, and Corky had 2 older children, Tracy and Eddie. As time progressed, he realized he couldn't operate 22 weeks in Western New York and Pennsylvania if he wanted to grow the business. Ironically, his brother Dick had an opportunity to join the show as the concessions manager, bringing over some games and food. Dick had many connections with various small fairs in North Carolina, which allowed the show to extend their season into the late fall. In 1989, the show purchased a winter quarters in Burgon, North Carolina. Due to the warmer climate, this allowed them the ability to refurbish more equipment. When his partner Bob Gillis decided to retire, Corky bought him out and incorporated the show in 1993. In the late 90s, they formed the DBA of that company, Powers Great American Midways. Some of Corky's various achievements span over multiple state associations. Corky has also been a long-standing member of many national and state associations.
I'd like to congratulate Corky on going into the Hall of Fame. It's very well deserved. Waited a long time for this day to congratulate him. There's nobody I can think of that's more deserving of this honor. He's always been a first-class gentleman for our industry. He always goes out of his way to help everybody. He's a true showman. From the time the show started out with probably 8-10 rides back in 1980, here we are 40 years later, and he still sets some of the highest standards of anybody I know. All his rides are immaculate. He has one of the nicest winter quarters in the country, a refurbishing center that they work year-round to keep everything immaculate. And I'm very, very happy and proud to call him my uncle, mentor, and friend, and I really am glad to see him achieve this honor and receive this honor.
PGAM was known as the best-kept secret. Finally, the secret got out, and in 2005, many large fairs came to visit his midway. In 2006, his show was able to secure 4 major fairs on the East Coast. He continues to play those fairs to date. Corky is known for his kindness and generosity, always willing to help his fellow man. His perfectionism and discipline has taken him to where he is today. He will tell you his failures have pushed him to try harder and have also taught him many life lessons. He has built a world-class show from the ground up. He gives the credit of his success to his faith, his family, and all the many people he has surrounded himself with throughout his life. Tonight, we honor Corky Powers as the 2020 inductee into the Outdoor Amusement Business Association's Hall of Fame.